Hey, all right. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? It's me, Eddie G, here with another brand new episode of Eddie G's Comic Culture, sponsored by, once again, the one and only Black Apparel. Sending a special shout out to them, thanking them once again for all the contributions and the work that they've made towards the show. Um, they also have they had a great website for you guys to check out, www.blackapparelblk.com. You got some cool merchandise for you guys if you're interested and you have some time to spare. Make sure you check them out. And also wanting to send a special shout out to my friends on Instagram, the one and only the Strictly Comedy Vault, who's been riding with me from the very beginning. He's got some great content on his page. Actually, he's done a great little review today for Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. Make sure you check that out. And also to Blu-ray Dan, who also has not just an Instagram account, but he's got his own YouTube channel. He's got quite a following. The man's got some insightful reviews on upcoming Blu-rays as well as old movies as well. Make sure you, whenever you get an opportunity, to check out his page and his channel. They got some good content. And in this episode today, I wanted to discuss one of my personal favorites. I know earlier on this week I've made videos regarding the 90s and wanting to touch up on the pop culture that happened in that decade. And today's no different. I am going to talk about the 1994 film, The Crow, which starred Brandon Lee, the late great Brandon Lee, might I add. This was a very difficult film. It's a personal one, I guess you could say, because at that time I was a teenager, and what it dealt with. There was always a mystery the mystery that shrouded this movie was very distressing. It's of course, if you haven't known, and you know now, Brandon Lee, who was Bruce Lee's son, was tragically killed on set of the film during one of the gunfight scenes, and apparently, as that scene was taking place, one of the guns were actually were loaded with live rounds rather than blanks, and it struck the man, of course. And when he apparently, I believe he died on the scene, or if he passed on, if he, I'm not too sure if he died on the scene or if he passed away in the hospital, but it's a very, very sad tale considering the history surrounding this family. His father, Bruce Lee, of course, who also passed away early in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken, early 70s. There was also mystery shrouding his death, and he was a very impactful person in the community, in action films, honestly. A lot of people mention Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan has always been a great, entertainer. I love the fact that he does, that all of his martial arts have always had that, his own style, his own imprint on it. It's very comedic, but Bruce Lee was always very serious. He did have some humor in some of his movies, but he was a much more serious actor regarding regarding the martial arts genre, and particularly so kung fu. Um, but before I get beside myself regarding that, I wanted to discuss exactly The Crow. Um, Let me say that it's an excellent comic book film. Honestly, it's one of the greats, if not, up. It's definitely up there with one of the greats. Honestly speaking, um, the story, of course, surrounds Brandon Lee. He plays a character by the name of Eric Draven. I believe he was the first actually to be published in the Crow series. The Crow issues were always the Crow series always had different characters portraying, certain characters that would come back to life to finish unfinished business, actually, or to seek vengeance for the injustices that they suffered because apparently they died, and those who were the root cause of their deaths were still at large. And that's the case with this film. Eric Draven, who was living in an apartment with his fiance. Um, I assume the setting is Detroit. I'm not too sure. I believe Detroit definitely did practice this Devil's Night thing, where the night before Halloween they would set the abandoned houses on fire throughout the city, and it takes place then on prior to Halloween night. And as you see the opening shot, the city's burning, uh, literally burning, almost burning down to the ground because as a whole you see nothing but fires throughout the landscape, and him and his fiance are at home, and a gang of thugs actually bum rush their apartment, and of course they have their way with them. They end up they have Draven bound and beaten, and they have their way with his fiance in front of him, if to a point where she's actually being raped in front of his face. And then as they're going off and doing their thing, and he's pleading for them to stop and to leave his fiance alone, they're beating him down until ultimately they throw him from the top. They throw him from his own window, and he, of course, passes away as he lands on the street. Um, some time passes, and then of course, the crow lands on the his head on his tombstone, and as it's pecking away at the at the tombstone, and it's awakening his spirit, of course, its soul, and he ends up crawling out of his grave, and he sees the crow. The crow is actually connected to him spiritually in some sort of way, where he actually sees things through the crow's eyes, actually. So he ends up returning back to his apartment, and it's still taped off by the police with the yellow tape, and but it's abandoned. No one's there. As he goes in, he starts recognizing things, and he starts having the flashbacks again of the night that he and his fiance were murdered. And you can tell you can tell the man had some. This is where it's sad, in all honesty, because not just the fact that it's surrounding the mystery surrounding his death as to how it happened, how anything like this could happen on set in any movie to begin with, but we actually get to see his range as an actor. We see that he's actually a pretty, Brandon Lee actually took his craft very seriously, and had the if he had he had the opportunity, I'm sure he was poised to become one of the greats. You know, certainly later on down the line of his career. But of course, he dons the makeup, and then he goes back out and starts looking for the gang that did this to him and his fiance. And along the way, of course, he goes to where the crow actually keeps tabs as to where these criminals are. They obviously work for the kingpin of this in the movie, and he shows Draven where they all are. He gives them the locations, and he finds them, and then he takes care of them. He kills them all, obviously, but not before letting them know exactly who he is, coming back from the dead. And what's so great about this movie is how everything is just so. It's pretty serious, It's a very serious film, and the characters that are involved are very serious as well. Before I even forget to mention, he befriends a police officer who is brilliantly played by Ernie Hudson. If you don't know him, he was actually the head warden of a prison in a show called Oz that was on HBO for quite some time, some years ago. And more importantly, famously known as the character Winston Zedmore in the Ghostbusters movies. And in the process, he befriends him, and he befriends a little girl who happens to be a daughter of a bartender that just so happens to be the bar where the gang frequents, and the woman is actually dating one of them. So it's pretty awesome. We got some good actors in there. John Polito's there as well. He actually he plays a pawn shop dealer and an owner, if I'm not mistaken. And he's one of the first people that Draven actually goes by to see as he collects the wedding bands that were taken from him, that were stolen from him and his fiance in the beginning of the film. And as he blows, he starts telling, he gives his character exactly, Gideon, if I'm not mistaken. John Polito's character's name goes by the name of Gideon on the movie. And one of the powerful scenes in that is where where Draven is going through the box of jewelry and he starts seeing all these rings falling out, and then he finally finds his, and you see him actually having the flashbacks back of actually him proposing to his fiance. But what's cool about that scene, what was really powerful about it, was that he has the box of jewelry, the box of rings. I'm assuming they were all engagement rings, and he starts taking them out and throwing them at him one by one, telling him that each one of those rings that he held in his possession in his shop were lives that he participated in helping destroy. And with that being said, Draven blows the shit up out of his shop, like, you know. So it's pretty crazy, and that's where him and Ernie Hudson, I forgot his character's name in the film, but they run into each other outside, and you know, Hudson's character is convinced that at this point he's a ghost, and in a way he's actually right, but he can actually touch him, and you know, it's not like he's a spirit being or so on and so forth. Like, the man is has solid matter. You can actually put your finger on him and touch him, because he's alive, as he was alive himself. So with that being said, he goes ahead and Draven goes on a rampage. The police don't know what's going on. They're finding bodies left and right all over the town, all over the city, from these gang members. They're all getting, clipped one by one, and and it's being done in a poetic manner, because they're pretty much just at this point becoming victims of their own. They become victims of their own behavior, I guess you could say. They lose their life, as they confront Everdraven. But and this is how it goes down with each one of these individuals. I know one of them is Funboy, if I remember correctly, and that scene, there was an awesome scene with Funboy actually. Him and the bartender that I mentioned earlier are heroin addicts, and they're shooting up dope in the apartment. And before they know it, Draven is actually hiding in the shadows, and he shows up finally, and he starts informing him how he gives him a joke about Jesus. He starts off with a joke about Jesus Christ. He's like, "Stop me if you heard this. Jesus Christ walks into a hotel. He's got 3 nails in his hand and wonders, and says to the desk clerk, 'I was wondering, could you put me up for the night?'" And in the meantime, as he's telling the joke, he's getting shot by Funboy. And then finally he puts his hand on the barrel of the gun. Funboy shoots, and then he's pretending to be in dying pain, obviously. But then as he's turning around, Funboy's laughing his head off to an extent, because he's calling him crazy for what it's worth. But then as he turns around, he shows him the palm of his hand, and you see the hole of the bullet wound closing up right in front of his face. And that's when he realizes he's in some deep shit. So with that being said, he obviously destroys him, and then he warns the mother, because Draven befriended this little girl in a movie who happens to be her daughter, that your daughter's out there in the streets because you're in here getting high. And one of the things that stood out of that message was mother was the name of the. He says that one of the messages that Draven delivers, that Brandon delivers so perfectly as his character in the movie, as he tells this woman, mother is the name on the lips of children is another name on the lips of children for God. And in other words, he's telling her to stop poisoning herself, because his daughter is out there running the streets by herself. So that's another impactful moment in the film as well. David Patrick Kelly, who played Luther in The Warriors, who shot Cyrus, and who also played Sully in Commando. Once again, playing the villain, and he ends up getting killed horrendously by Draven, as he literally gets duct taped to the car, and he gets duct taped in his own vehicle, and for some reason, I don't know, somehow he ends up exploding the car and he sends it flying right off the dock into the water, and you already know the man is dead. So, but at that scene, when he's doing with that scene where David Patrick Kelly's scene is actually pretty important as well, because as he's about to die, he actually recognizes Draven's face through the makeup and all. And you hear him saying to himself, "You can't come back, there's no coming back. You can't come back, there's no coming back. You're not real, there's no coming back." So, again, another impactful moment in the film that really stood out. Um, and then, of course, when it all leads down to the final fight with the Kingpin, who ordered the massacre to begin with, and it becomes very important. It's a very climactic scene as they're fighting on top of a church, if I'm not mistaken, and Draven is suffering automatically because they figured out how to hurt him in the film. I know I'm giving away spoilers right about now, but this is my own personal review. But another awesome sequence is when he finally puts his hands on the man's face, and of course, the he actually manages to transfer the pain of his fiance, who was battling, internal injuries for hours in the hospital, and put it on, and he managed to transfer that the energy of the pain that his fiance was feeling to the to said Kingpin in the film. And that was also another powerful moment. This movie is definitely impactful in so many ways. It is it is the images, the imagery that's used in this film, and even knowing that at some point close to the end of the film, we actually lose Brandon because of the unnecessary tragedy that occurred on the set of this movie. It literally tore your heart open, and I was very upset. You see, it's moments like this, and I think films like that do deserve some sort of mention or recognition from the Academy, and they don't get it, I guess, because of the fact that it's because A, it's a comic book film, and B, they didn't want to feel like they were pandering to the fact that this person passed away, and it's all just a bunch of bull. Because at the end of the day, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I'm not a fan of the Academies. I don't really watch the Oscars. And 9 times out of 10, it's always whatever film is nominated for Best Picture is always some artsy fartsy garbage that I really could care less about. And 9 times out of 10, if I was to ever see it, I would come out with the extreme notion that the movie was nothing but stupid, absolutely stupid. One of my and I was just actually watching. This was actually one of the gripes. What I'm saying, and it's funny because I actually was watching Seinfeld earlier today. Not to jump off track or anything like that, but I was watching that episode where they had. I don't know if you guys remember the movie The English Patient that came out around 1996. That thing was such a major thing for some reason. It was such a major motion picture, and I don't understand why. I never understood why. I didn't care for it. It looked like a real. It looked like a really obnoxious movie to watch, man. Like it just felt like it really just it was a self-serving film, and why would I watch that garbage? And on top of that, Ray Fiennes, I mean, I know these guys do this, but the actors in that movie in itself, they could have done better. They could have gotten Oscars for other works that they've done beforehand that were far more worthy of the Best Picture nominee than that crap. But apparently, this is the type of bias that the academies look at this point. So I'm keep hoping once in a while that we see something that's actually appreciated by the general audiences make it into this, make it onto the awards show ceremony one day. But the hell am I? I'm not gonna hold my breath for it anyway. But it was a definitely. I thought it was a definite contender that year for that, and for that to for the film to not get that sort of recognition from the Academy was real shady and grimy. It was an unnecessary snub to them, honestly, because it was a great film. And if you watch the movie Dark City, you'll see exactly what type of work that Alex Proy has done. The most, I think, the least pop. The one thing that he did was that got some that wasn't like the one considered, and it wasn't even a dud really. It just wasn't all that great. I, Robot. He directed that one, which I liked. Honestly speaking, I thought it was cool. The third act I wasn't too crazy about, but it was still a pretty good movie. In all essence. But The Crow really did deserve any and all of the recognition from the Academy that year, and it didn't get it. It really didn't get it. Around that time, all like I said, and that's where my beef with the '90s comes, kicking in. There was a lot of self-serving bullshit movies that were getting a lot of nominations, leaving Las Vegas, so on and so forth. Like, who gives a rat's ass? These people are getting stoned off their ass all day, getting high off of heroin. Who cares? Why is this even being even not? Why is this even considered for a nomination? Why is it even a runner-up to begin with? You know what I'm saying? So at that point, like the board, like I lost all interest in watching the Oscars. The Oscars are complete garbage. It's nonsense. It's fake. It's really just some self-serving, posh garbage for, you know, once in a while they have some good taste, when Argo won for Best Picture, and but like I said, that's besides the point. The Crow was one of the first films of all of comic book films, honestly, that I felt that deserved that nomination for Best Picture for the Academies, and then of course you have The Dark Knight, and although I'm not a big fan of Christian Bale as Batman, I mean, please don't heart me for this, but it is what it is. And I was writing out number one. I was the one who was supporting Christian Bale from the very beginning because I loved his work in The Machinist. I loved his work in American Psycho and what was the name of that movie? I think it was called Equilibrium. He was to me, he's a great actor. But once he portrayed Batman in that ridiculous voice that he decided to do, out the window. But then, of course, the villains always outshined everyone else in these movies, and continuing the tradition in all Batman movies, the villains always get the best shine. Liam Neeson for one in Batman Begins, and then of course you have Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight, who did not even a fantastic job. The man did a phenomenal job playing the Joker. Let's call it what it is. The man did a phenomenal job playing the Joker, and rightfully so. He did get an Oscar for it, unfortunately, even though he passed away at that time. But it was an Oscar that was well deserved on his behalf, because that was a hell of a performance to this day. And I'm sorry, I like Jared Leto. I'm looking forward to seeing what he's gonna do with Blade Runner 2049, definitely so. But nothing like, he still has to, I gotta see more material of him once he puts the makeup on again, and hopefully we get to see something more of that, reminiscent of the Joker that we all know and love from both the comics and and past feature films. But The Crow to me was was the major contender, and then on top of that you had the soundtrack. The soundtrack was amazing. The soundtrack had The Cure and Stone Temple Pilots, Pantera. It was an amazing soundtrack, man. I'm not even gonna lie to you. It was a good soundtrack. And if Nine Inch Nails also that was in there. That was another. They had like all of the songs were 5-star songs. They were fantastic. It was great music to listen to. However ominous it may have been, considering not just the topic of the film, but as well as the tragedy that surrounded the film. It's it definitely goes hand in hand with it. So with a lot of it was a very important film for me growing up, and I hope that it continues. That once they decide to go with because I know they are planning a reboot. I hope that they go with the honorable route, and if because a lot of people were saying, oh, but it didn't really follow the comic books like that. Even though it didn't really follow the comic books like that originally, they still did a hell of a job, a fantastic job at that, at delivering a great movie to watch, excellent performances all around, and hopefully the reboot actually honors that sort of the mythology and the tone of the film, the atmospheric tone of the film, the original film. But all we can do is just wait and see as usual. But definitely one of my favorites going down, and I do plan on getting. I had the Blu-ray. I ended up losing it on the move coming down to Florida, but I do intend. That's one of the movies that I definitely. If you lose a copy, you have to pick another copy up immediately for replacement, because you can't just. It has to be in a collection. It's a must in that collection. So, with that being said, I want to wrap this episode up. Once again, thanking all of you guys for being there with me, watching the show. Once again, you already know the deal. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, hit the comment section. I'll be going through them every now and again. Anything that you want to see me talk about in future episodes, definitely. Well, let's interact. Let's make this a communicative forum. I'm hoping to hear from you guys shortly. But definitely thanks again for all the support that I've been getting. So, with that being said, I'll see you guys around. Take it easy and take care. Alright.